I will always remember the last time our immediate family were together. It was back in February. We wondered if we should all meet in York, given that's where both of the UK's COVID cases were at the time. But we went for it and had a wonderful day together. As it was half term, we thought we'd make a short break of it and spend a couple of nights at the mother-in-law's house. On one of those nights, everyone else had gone to bed, leaving me downstairs to read/fall asleep on the settee, as you do at my age. I woke up at 12:36, so I turned the lights off and made my way upstairs. I crept along the landing, not wanting to disturb anyone, and quietly opened the bedroom door, went in and shut the door behind me. So far, so good. I then heard Paula's mum say, "Are you in the wrong bedroom?" Walking in the darkness is not a particularly pleasant experience. Apart from the mistakes we can make, which I've just told you about, it can also be very disorientating and quite frightening, depending on where you are. Just round the corner from where we live, one of the streetlights isn't working. It's amazing how much difference that makes. Just think if none of them are working. You wouldn't fancy going far on a street like that, and that would be just you. Here in Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 2, it says, "The people walking in darkness have seen a great light." Just imagine if you were one of those people. What a difference it would make to see a great light before you. It's interesting that the original word that's translated darkness had the meaning of misery, destruction, death, ignorance, sorrow, and wickedness. The words throw us back upon verses from the previous chapter, Isaiah 8, verses 21 and 22. The prophet sees a vision of a light shining on the forlorn and weary wanderers. They had been wandering in the valley of the shadow of death. Now there breaks the dawn of a glorious day. We cannot positively say that such a fulfillment as that was in the prophet's thoughts. The context shows that he was thinking of Assyrian invasions and the defeat of armies from that land, of a nation growing strong in numbers and prosperity. In this, as in other cases, the New Testament gospel writer adapts the words of prophecy to a further meaning than that which was apparently in the mind of the writer, and interprets them as the Lord led him. And how relevant these words are of light in the darkness at the back end of such a difficult and historic year. With scientists, politicians, and some in the medical profession walking in the darkness in the early stages, there wasn't much hope for the rest of us. And although the vaccine offers a glimmer of light for us all, there's a dark winter to negotiate first. How we need a great light in the darkness. And these famous words offer us just that. His name is Jesus, the one who said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." Although I've lived all my adult life in cities, I spent much of my childhood in the countryside. my grandma would often be with us on a Sunday, and then, after the evening service, we'd take her back to the town where she lived, about 15 miles away. In the winter, this meant a round trip of around 30 miles in the dark. I never complained. It was so nice having my grandma over for the day. Besides, I wasn't doing the driving anyway. Often we'd follow a car going along the same way, and following them must have made driving that bit easier on a dark night. You were almost carried along by their light. You'd just be getting used to this, and then the car in front would inevitably turn off in a different direction, and you had to negotiate the rest of the journey by yourself. As we grapple with the darkness that life can bring, we find ourselves following lots of people in one sense. To follow has taken on a whole new meaning in social media since the days when Jesus spoke these words. The 3 people with the most followers on Instagram are, at this point I would invite participation, Cristiano Ronaldo, Ariana Grande, and Dwayne Johnson. I have never met these people, although I did see Ronaldo at the tennis one year. They don't know me, and they never will. They don't know what they're missing. Sometimes those we follow can go off in a different direction to the way that we're going, leaving us in the dark. But I'm following someone who knows everything about me, the one who understands my strengths and my weaknesses, and his name is Jesus. Because I follow him, I have the light of life. One of Jesus' disciples, John, wrote in his first letter, "If we walk in the light, as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his Son, cleanses us from all sin." There's a little word towards the end of that verse, which should be an encouragement to each one of us, and that's all. As an old song once said, "O wonder of all wonders, that through thy death for me, my open sins, my secret sins, can all forgiven be." We all need forgiveness. Without it, our lives are not the healthy ones we would want and indeed need them to be. But as John said, if we walk in the light of the Lord, then his forgiveness is freely available to us. No matter where we are spiritually, his light can make a difference. If I produced a montage of my moments of 2020, my first visit to the tip in COVID times would be included. The sign round the corner from the entrance saying 3 hours wait time from here. I never had to wait that long in Alton Towers. That day it was only an hour at the end, but after that I made sure I was first in the queue, even if it meant waiting at the gates. This wasn't too bad in the summer. I took some work to do. I got quite a lot done actually. But with the advent of autumn, I was sitting in the dark and it was getting a bit cold. I remember one morning thinking about all the places I'd seen the sunrise over the years. On a plane, at the Cornish coastline, and the pictures I'd taken to capture the moment. I sat there at the gates of the tip, thinking this would not be one of those moments. But how wrong I was. For in my wing mirror I could see a beautiful sunrise, and with every passing minute I was bathed in a warm glow, of what was developing around me. I got out of the car and turned around, and there before me was a beautiful sky. A sunrise so majestic that it took your breath away. There, with all my rubbish, I saw the heavens declaring the glory of God, the skies proclaiming the work of his hands. Jesus, the light of the world, has come not just for the beautiful places and people. He's come for those burdened with the rubbish in their lives. He meets them where they are and shows them his glory. Aristotle once said, "It is during our darkest moments that we must focus to see the light." Just as the light was right behind me at the tip, so the Lord is right behind his people, shining his light and giving them hope. He is the year-round light, not just for Christmas. Today was the day we always used to put up the Christmas lights when we were children. We put them up 12 days before Christmas and took them down 12 days after. None of this putting them up in November and taking them down on Boxing Day. It was always a sad moment when they came down in January and packed away for another year. How we need to make sure we don't treat Jesus, the light of the world, like that. We enjoy him at Christmas and then put him away until next year. Jesus is the light that is for life, not just for Christmas. And this leads us on to our second point, that Jesus offers life for the distressed. Watching the news can often be an upsetting experience. For if you take any average bulletin, you have a window into the world of distressed people, and for all sorts of reasons. COVID-19 and its subsequent effects, bereavement, separation, and unemployment. Those stuck in flats with dangerous cladding. Families who've lost children in war. Those who've lost everything in natural disasters. And although we've been dealing with something new this year, distress has been with us going right back to the first people themselves. It was certainly around in Isaiah's day. Let's go back. Readings at carol services may start at verses 6 and 7, and we will get to those verses, I promise you. They may begin at verse 2, or perhaps at verse 1 of chapter 9. But I want to take you back even further, to the closing words of chapter 8 of Isaiah, and read them through into the next chapter, because that is the context we need. It says this: when someone tells you to consult mediums and spiritists, who whisper and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living? Consult God's instruction and the testimony of warning. If anyone does not speak according to this word, they have no light of dawn. Distressed and hungry, they will roam through the land. When they are famished, they will become enraged, and looking upwards will curse their king and their God. Then they will look towards the earth and see only distress and darkness and fearful gloom, and they will be thrust into utter darkness. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but in the future he will honour Galilee of the nations, by the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. I've only been speaking on this passage for 25 years. Now at last I'm giving you the context. The Jesus whose birth we celebrate offers life for the distressed. He doesn't offer an end to distress in this life, but he, the resurrection and the life, offers hope beyond the darkness of this world and into a place of eternal light beyond for all who put their trust in him on this earth. Jesus said, "I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." He is for life, not just for Christmas. I remember back in the mists of time, we used to sing at church. A song that remained popular was "Lord, I lift your name on high," with the line, "I'm so glad you're in my life." We may not be able to sing it in our buildings, but we can know it in our hearts. That hasn't changed. I'm so glad that Jesus, light of the world, is in my life, that he is with me whatever comes my way. The oft quoted 23rd Psalm, and I think I've quoted it more this year than any other, says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, through the valley of deepest darkness, you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." He doesn't say that because the Lord is our shepherd, he'll take us out of the dark valleys. But it does promise that when we trudge through them, the Lord is right there with us, a light in our distress. And so we have seen that the Lord is a light for the darkness. He is life for the distressed. Thirdly and finally, he is Lord for the duration. At last, we come to the verses you may have thought I'd have focused on in the first place. "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this." There have been many descriptions of the government this year, a number of them unsuitable for this talk. But the government spoken of here in Isaiah is great, and the counsel is wonderful. Our God is mighty, our Father is everlasting, and our peace can only be in him, the Prince of Peace. He is Lord for the duration. Those words, "no end" and "forever," are of enormous comfort in a year when so much that we thought was permanent has gone for good. Established high street names, routines and ways of life that are yet to return and may never will. There will be no end to the greatness of this government. His justice and righteousness will be established and upheld forever and this child, this Son, this Lord was born for us. To quote a song, I think I quoted from another verse from last week. We may not know, we cannot tell what pains he had to bear, but we believe it was for us he hung and suffered there. Common to the Easter hymn and the Christmas reading are those two short words, for us. This child, this Son, this wonderful Counselor, this mighty God, this everlasting Father, this Prince of Peace is for us. He's for you and for me. He's for life, not just for Christmas. He is Lord for the duration. Our leaders come and go, but our Lord comes and stays. Jesus said in those words captured in Revelation, the last book of the Bible, "Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person, and they with me." I remember when our children were small, it was one of the moments of the festive season when their grandma and granddad arrived in the gathering gloom of a Christmas Eve afternoon. They heard their voices, they opened the door and let them in, and we ate together, probably far too much. And then a few days later, they'd gone. I mean, that sounds a bit like we ate grandma and granddad, but we obviously didn't. As time went by, Paula and I heard their voices. We opened the door and let them in. We would go upstairs and say that Grandma and Grandad had arrived. And they would look up from their book or device, depending on which era we were in, and come down at some stage, usually for something to eat. Times come and go. Sadly, our visitors may not come at all this year. But our Lord comes and stays, and is with us for life, not just for Christmas. In 1739, a new Christmas song appeared. Hark, how all the welkin rings. The original tune was slow and solemn, just as the composer had intended. In its humble beginnings, it may not have stood the test of time. After all, who knows what a welkin is anyway? I obviously don't, because when I looked it up, it's actually clouds in the plural. But with a bit of a makeover from George Whitfield and a cracking tune from Felix Mendelssohn, we know it better as Hark the Herald Angels Sing, and Charles Wesley's classic has been sung ever since. It's words from that song which sum up our message today. Light and life to all he brings, risen with healing in his wings. Jesus is for life, not just for Christmas. He is the light for our darkness, the life for our distress, and the Lord for the duration, both of this pandemic and beyond, in this world and the next. What is your response to him? Let me take you back to when the Magnificent Seven, aka our family, had that day in York back in February. We had a number of options that were met with varying degrees of enthusiasm, but our mutual love of chocolate took us to the Chocolate Story, where those famous festive favourites, chocolate oranges and other selection box goodies come from. Okay, it wasn't Cadbury World, but it was chocolate, so you couldn't go wrong. As I was typing this, I was wondering where this was going, as you may be yourself. But in summing up our response to the one who is for life, not just for Christmas, the verse came to mind, taste and see that the Lord is good. The highlight of any such trip, of course, is the tasting of the chocolate. You could even make your own chocolate lolly, which may not have survived to the train station for the journey home. But to visit the chocolate story without tasting any is like enjoying Christmas without sampling Jesus for yourself. This attraction wasn't just for the children. Believe me, the adults took their lolly making very seriously. Christmas is for the children, so we're told, but Jesus is for everyone. Can I invite you to taste and see for yourself? To invite him into your life, to walk in his light, to take hold of his life and trust him as Lord. And if you've already done this, there's something for you too. The Apostle Peter says in his first letter, like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up in your salvation, now that you have tasted that the Lord is good. Because of this newborn baby coming to this earth 2,000 years ago, the one who was prophesied centuries before that, we can taste for ourselves the difference he makes. Light and life to all he brings. May each of us know his light, his life, and his lordship, not just for life, but for Christmas.